All right, there's Ty. So, all right, looks like we hit our numbers. Give one more minute. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm sorry,
You got enough.
we are good. Okay. Excuse me. Welcome everyone. I'll call the Water and Sewer Board meeting for Tuesday, the 11th to order. Start with Brenda, if you would take the roll.
Okay. Board Member Bereski,
Present.
Board Member Mercier. Not here. Board Member Ridley,
Present.
Board Member Roth,
Present.
Board Member Freeman. Not here. Council Member Anderson is absent. Council Member Woodward,
Present.
Mayor Sierra is absent. Vice Chair Habenik
Present.
and Chair Moore.
Present, and actually I know Caitlin intends to be here because we had a discussion item, so hopefully she'll be able to join. Great, thank you. I'll start with item 3A, approval of the minutes from the March 14th Water and Sewer Board meeting. Can I get a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Any second?
I'll second.
All right, thank you. Any changes or comments? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Next, item 4 is public forum. Brenda, do we have any members of the public to speak to us tonight?
We do not.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5, new business. And 5A, I will turn it over to Operations and Maintenance Utility Deputy Director Josh Roach. It's a mouthful for me. So Josh, if I'm not sure, Josh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Good evening again, Water and Sewer Board. I'm presenting tonight a request for on-call construction services at our Allen Water Treatment Plant and remote sites. These are for general and emergency repairs, kind of as needed. We issued an SOQ for this in January 2023, in which we received 7 submittals. And again, just to recap here, so this is for general repairs, emergency repairs, for example, projects such as chemical piping repairs and improvements, for general facility repairs, improvements, emergency pump station repairs as well. These are for on-call sort of general and emergency type items. And again, we issued this SOQ back in January of 23, in which we received 7 submittals, and we're recommending to you tonight that we proceed with Iron Woman. We're proceeding with them because essentially they were able to perform all of the services in which we were looking for. They also meet all qualifications, have extensive experience with municipal projects. They're the on-call contractor for many local front range utilities, and they had an excellent safety culture. This contract amount would be to not exceed $250,000. And with that, I will take any questions.
Any questions for Josh? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion for item 5A as written?
Hey, John, I had a
Oh,
question.
yes, Ty, please go ahead.
Sorry, I was trying to figure out where my hand was here. I was just curious, Josh, how was the pricing spread? Were they the most competitive or?
We did not choose them based off them necessarily being the cheapest contractor. The reason we selected them was basically because they were the only contractor that could perform all of the services in which we were looking for. Whereas other contractors didn't really meet the need for everything we was looking for. So in our perspective, they were really the only ones that met the need. So we chose based more off that as opposed to more of like a low bid.
Thanks. Yeah, and I think in the future it's useful to kind of see what the spread is on
Sure.
what we receive back from the proposals, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of to backtrack a little bit, this was an SOQ that was issued. So really, it's just more of like a statement of qualifications as opposed to specific bids. So I apologize, I kind of messed up there, but it's more of an SOQ to see what sort of service they perform.
No, that's totally okay, especially if they were by far the most qualified and kind of fit the city's needs. I was just curious. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, my understanding on this one, in talking to the committee or the committee that actually evaluated the proposals, was that basically all the other providers did not, they didn't meet what we were looking for. And really the only provider that actually met the minimum level of what we're looking for this on-call was Iron Woman. Some of them also, you know, by reference, you know, they're contractors that work within the industry, but by reference, and especially through some reference with some of the experiences we've had over at SPR, we disqualified because of the experiences. We know of at least 2 that have worked over there that we have chose not to continue to work with because of just the performance and the quality of the work. And so I think once that was all considered, it ultimately distilled down to, we only had 1. And in reality, we would have liked to have a couple of on-calls so that we can, you know, send different things out and get some more competitive pricing. But we couldn't do a couple because there was really only 1 that could do it. I think we might, you know, consider in the future trying to see if we can drum up some more business for this, see if we can get someone else to do it. But at least this gets us going. Ultimately, it'd be nice to have it the way we have the line break on calls. So we have 3 of them. We send them to different on calls at different times, and it keeps them all honest. So I think we'd like to get there, but we just, this first round, we're only comfortable with 1.
Thanks for sharing.
Any additional questions? A moment. All right, let's go back in. Can I get a motion for item 5A as written in the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion carries. Moving on to item 6A. It's just an information item. Peter, I think the floor is yours, or?
Yep, I'll start this, and then we have our new public works director, Rachael, here as well, and he'll go through the stormwater capital plan that's proposed right now. We're in the early stages of preparing for the budget. This is usually the first step every year. It seems like just as soon as we get done with the previous year's budget, we immediately start working on the next year's budget. And so we're here to present capital, our proposed capital 5-year capital plan for water and sewer and storm. So given that this is the 3rd year since the master plan, or 4th year since the master plan that we're that we're proposing the capital, we're really honing in on what our focuses are. And it's all things that the board has seen before and what you're seeing the contracts come through for. So taste, odor, and hardness, lead service line replacement, and then other aging infrastructure where we can get contracts going, where we can get staff in place to actually to execute. The major capital projects, city ditch, that's our biggest one that we have going right now. We're going to get heavy into construction in 2024. Big Dry Creek, same thing. We hope to finally get that one constructed and done. And then the process improvements at the Allen plant are a continual process of finding the most urgent thing on the list and addressing that. And then slowly getting to the point where we get away from urgent need to more ongoing replacement needs that's more scheduled and predictable. Next slide. So from a funding perspective, we've talked about a lot of the funding that we've received so far. So the first and foremost, rates and water sewer fund balance supports this. We do have a water fund balance that's been built up over time, and we'll spend that down over the next few years because we've got some large capital projects, most significantly of which is city ditch. We also have annual rate and fee increases that are planned. We've applied some of the ARPA money to utilities and we'll plan to, that's unrestricted federal money that we're putting towards water, sewer, and storm. We've talked about WIFIA. We're still working through the water side of WIFIA. We closed the loan, but we're still working with the State Historic Preservation Society as it relates to the historic value of the trench where a lead service line was dug 70 years ago. And so we finally got to a point where the EPA and the EPA and us have submitted to them a revised approach that they are in a 30-day review period. So we actually can't draw any money on that until we get that done. We've been a year trying to get that in place. It's been a bit more of a challenge than we had originally anticipated, considering we're removing lead service lines. We thought that would be a pretty significant priority. We think we'll get there. And then state revolving funds. Sarah's working diligently on getting us our application in by the end of the year for $70 million in an SRF loan, which is 52% low interest and 48% principal forgiveness. Now, with all of this, I think the thing to go back to, because we continually every year we look at how all of this fits into our long-term financial plan. And given the fact that we've now got access to this SRF money and this federal funds that comes through the infrastructure bill, it changes our debt structure about 5 or 6 or 7 years from now. So we're analyzing how bringing on another 52% of 70 million in debt in the 2030 to 2032 timeframe impacts what we need from a rate perspective to ensure we have debt coverage. So it's the money's available there. We're looking at how we can sculpt the debt in the future to ensure that we maintain predictable levels of rates. If you go back to when we originally did all the rate increases on the water side back in 2020, one of the things that came out of that was the lead service line was not funded. We had that as a placeholder of $1 million a year because the massive removal of lead service lines was not funded at that time. We've subsequently gotten access and have been successful getting a lot of low interest federal loans for that and grants as well. But we have to figure out how that's going to work 5 or 7 years from now when that money really starts to hit. So we're working on that. We don't anticipate it resulting in any kind of impact to rates in the next year, but it's going to be a discussion that we need to have in the coming years as we ramp up lead service line removal. So if we want to accelerate it, get them out as fast as possible, access this money as fast as possible, it could change what we need for rate increases 5 or 6 years from now. So this is the first time we're actually being able to model this now that we actually know what we're looking at from a funding source perspective. And so we know we have an issue probably 5 years from now, and we're working on it right now to build an approach that that accomplishes the goals, but also recognizes the predictability of rate increases to the degree that we can. So it's the first time I'm introducing that, because really it's the first time we're seeing it in our financial models that we need to start thinking about how we execute on the lead service line now that the money is available. Here you can see what we're focused on. It's a lot of deferred maintenance. It's a lot of projects that we're continuing to move forward with. One of the things that will change on this, I'm trying to see where the I'm not sure. Oh, there it is. Top one. Yeah, the top one. Thank you. So ops complex and the water fund. So right now we have 12 million in between the water and the sewer fund dedicated to modernizing our operations complex and our and office space so we can get out of trailers. I think that's going to be the spot in the near term where we look at more of a hybrid approach and maybe don't go with the full complex that we were thinking of. We think we can do some kind of a middle ground that still allows us to spend within our means, but also get some badly needed modernization from our operations center, and also just office space for people who are in trailers and people who don't have offices. Okay, next slide. So this is the lead service only program. If we do an accelerated process over the next 5 to 6 years, you can see it essentially it doubles our capital. So we end up spending almost 30 million a year, and sometimes more than 30 million a year for the next 5 or 6 years. This is what we're finally starting to model in our financial plans, and what we'll be crafting and sculpting to ensure that we don't create a spike in rates 5 years from now, but also balance the desire to get lead service lines out of the system as fast as possible. So this is what we're modeling. This is our starting point for actually funding the lead service line replacement program through WIFIA, SRF, and our rates and fees. And now we're iteratively going back into the financial models to figure out how to make it all work. So this will be a multi-year discussion over the next 4 or 5 years to zero in on the optimal approach to that. On the sewer side, it's pretty straightforward. It's funding the South Platte Renew Capital is the bulk of the funding need. You can see that what the 2024 amount is. We're seeing that what we're likely doing the same kind of thing at South Platte Renew, where we're gonna spread out some of that capital, defer it by 6 months to a year to smooth that out. So you can see there's an $8.5 million hit in 2024, and yet it drops off in 2027. It's not that the need drops off, it's that we're trying to time the project such that we don't spike our capital, which is what we do every year when we get actual pricing in, and then what the actual budgets are compared to the pricing for the projects. So this is our general estimate right now, and we expect that will evolve, but it's pretty close. And that is it. Well, no, so we'll go on to South Platte Renew specifics. And hold on, I'm getting an update on my computer that I have to shut off here. Okay, so you can see some of the main things that we're looking at. Our biggest things are solids handling. That's our solids process. We've got some improvements that are needed over there. Our operations complex, which we are actually kicking off the construction of in June. We're going to start by demolishing our building 2, which is a building that probably should have been demolished 15 years ago, but has been kept in service as extra office space for some maintenance crews. And we had some blowers in there. We're moving all that. It's an old solids handling building that really is falling into disrepair. So it needs to go. Next slide. We have ongoing replacements on our VFDs and MCCs. We have a lot of significant electrical over there. And so we program just a predictable amount every year based on what the needs are. And then we've are doing some near-term work on our dewatering process to help improve those areas. And then you can see as things move out in the 5-year period, you can just see that we're continually working on multiple processes, and we switch from, once we finish with one process, we go to another process and really try to cycle through them to keep them up to date and modern. And then we have vehicles, computers, and equipment. They're usually not too much. You can see, but it adds another about $500,000. So the total capital for South Platte Renew is right now is at 17 million. We expect that to come down a little bit. We think it's gonna, we had a meeting on this yesterday. We expect it to probably be closer to 16 million, which will then change the split from 8.5 to 8 per city. And so I'm going to turn this over to Victor to talk about stormwater.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Good afternoon, everyone. Victor Rachael, the Director of Public Works here at the city. So pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. So quick overview of the Stormwater Fund. Current focuses are mapping, inventory, and condition assessments, as well as maintaining our system in a more proactive instead of reactive manner, and then adding improvements for additional capacity and system reliability. On number one, I did want to add real quickly that we are finishing up actually our mapping and inventory of the system north of 285. That'll be loaded into our GIS system for better tracking. We did find 2 collapsed pipes through that process and are working on those repairs now. So that's been successful. As far as 2023 project updates, the South Inglewood Flood Reduction Project, still under process. We're working on plans and hope to get that under construction here Q3, Q4 this year. I did want to mention we closed on the property, the last piece of property for the pond at the end of January, 1st of February. And then at the moment, we're working on asbestos abatement. One of the buildings that's on the property came back hot for asbestos, and we're working through that now before completing all of the demolition at that location. Number 2, South Tacoma Phase 2 is done. South Tacoma 3, number 3 here on the list, is currently still in process. We're actually working with Excel to relocate gas lines that are in conflict. And then funding is going to be part of the challenge on that one as we move forward with number 1 here on this list, getting that into construction. So we're going to keep it moving, but it'll be somewhat dependent on where bids come in for the South Inglewood Pond. Last on the list here, our Old Hamden Utilities and Stormwater Improvement Project. We're continuing to advance that in design now, looking to advance and collaborate here with utilities as well as our partners along the corridor, addressing some concerns on the project. Next slide. Thank you. Funding sources for the stormwater fund here. We got 10 million in enterprise funds received in 2021, as well as we have the revolving fund of 26 million. Mile High has come to the table on a 50-50 match for a couple of projects. And then we also anticipate some inflation and rate increases in the future years. We've also pursued at least 2 grants with FEMA. Unfortunately, we have learned from FEMA over the last 2 or 3 weeks here that we did not receive those grants. So we're looking to debrief, and then we'll continue to pursue other opportunities for grants as they come up. Overall view here of the Stormwater Fund. Ending balance, or excuse me, beginning balance, I should say, beginning of the year, roughly 28.5. You can see the estimated sources, uses there, and then at end of the year, estimated balance around 9.7, with a request in 24 of a little over 21.5 million. Again, we expect the ponds to go to construction as well as the Old Hamden project, which are going to consume the large majority of the funding available. Breaking it down here year by year, again in 24, we're going to be extremely busy with projects going to construction as well, some of our regular maintenance. We anticipate kicking off in 24, scoping, TVing, and getting everything into GIS of our existing system there and cleaning it. We got those large projects that I touched on, Old Hamden, South Inglewood, and then we've got some regular maintenance as well as the 50-50 match you can see on here from Mile High for at least 2 projects, the Dry Gulch and then the South Inglewood Drainage Way. Not playing nice there. Yeah. And with that, happy to take any questions. And I know we got Pieter's in here as well. So yeah, let us know what you guys got.
Ty, sorry, Ty, go ahead.
I'm just curious, maybe this is a question for Victor or Peter, if we're moving the stormwater away from this board next year, if this is the last year we'll be covering that.
No real progress on that. I'm not sure where the discussions sit on that. Right now, we're moving forward this year as we've been in years past, where Public Works will come and present the capital program. I know it's still something to be decided. I think the council needs to work through how they potentially want this to work. But right now, there's not a real pressure on it, but also we've had the discussion. I don't think it's really evolved much since we last talked.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. Clearly a lot of things going on. All right. Next up, we have no old business. So we'll move to staff's choice and a potential executive session, but I think we're starting outside of that.
Yeah, I think Victoria is going to take this one, and I don't think we're going into exec yet, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
So I am sharing my screen with you. So I'm here to provide a summary of proposed land use legislation that impacts the city and its water infrastructure. This is SB 23-213. And what it would do, it would impose state land use requirements on certain municipalities and resort centers that aims at increasing density. The bill is premised on the idea that if zoning requirements are relaxed to allow for more density, it will increase housing supply, resulting in decreased home prices. The state standards to implement this vary in degree and application to certain local governments, depending on whether they're urban centers and where they're located. However, for our purposes, all standards would apply to Englewood. So here are just a few of the provisions in this 100-page plus bill. It will require the city to develop a plan to address affordable housing. It'll require a greenfield analysis to meet certain statewide strategic growth objectives. Accessory dwelling units will be a use by right in every zone that allows for single-family housing, which would override existing zoning covenants and deed restrictions. Additionally, middle housing would be a use by right, and that includes townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, all the way up to sixplexes. The legislation would also require multifamily development, which is one or more buildings on one lot with separate living units for 3 or more households, as a use by right in key corridors, which are areas that are in frequent transit service within a quarter mile. Now, these top-down requirements ignore local needs, such as compatibility with other surrounding housing structures, minimum lot sizes and setbacks. There's no requirement for off-street parking, and significantly, there's no consideration for stormwater capacity, sewer capacity, or water capacity. Those aren't addressed in this bill. But again, density is a use by right. Now, the law does allow for exemptions to these land use requirements, where a municipality would be able to apply to DOLA, Department of Local Affairs, for an extension of time in order for these requirements to apply. It's not clear how long that extension would be. And the extension is only, you're only eligible to apply for the extension based on deficient water, sewer, or stormwater services. The bill doesn't account for any other public infrastructure or service burden. And to obtain the extension, the municipality must have a plan to remedy the deficiency on a specific timeline and show that it cannot serve other less efficient housing types than those provided in the mandate. Those provisions do not account for pre-existing service requirements, and they do not account for any long-term planning and suggest that the municipalities must fund the development to accommodate the state mandate. Now that the standards that DOLA will use to assess these extensions have not yet been developed. And then additionally, the city will be required to report a water efficiency and water loss accounting annually to the Colorado Water Conservation Board. The board will adopt standards by January 1st, 2025. It's not clear what that data will be used for exactly. There is language in the legislative mandate or declaration of the bill that implies that the state would potentially be creating a statewide water management plan. And then finally, beginning June 30th, 2024, the city must include a water planning, there's going to be water planning reporting requirements that include the extent of the water supply, conservation policies, and priorities for natural and agricultural land under the state's natural and agricultural land priorities report. DOLA is going to be required to receive those draft reports and final plans and must review them for compliance. And I don't know that I shared the right screen. But with that, are there any questions regarding this legislation? The legislative session adjourns on May 6th. So we'll know whether or not this is adopted by then. There are a number of jurisdictions in our surrounding areas that have adopted resolutions in opposition to this bill. That includes Lone Tree, Centennial, Greenwood Village, Aurora, and Wheat Ridge. And I believe Littleton is looking at it in executive session tonight.
Vicki, what would, just before we open up for questions, what would drive us into executive session tonight? I know that was contemplated.
If there were any specific legal questions related to this bill and its overall impact. If there are general questions, again, this is because it is somewhat hypothetical. It is a bill. It's not yet a law that is in fact impacting the city. We don't necessarily need to go into executive session.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, any questions? Well, I'll go first, making some commentary. If we mentioned this in our last session, at the time we were talking about changes Inglewood was considering that would increase density. Those have been, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, those have been put on hold, or elements of that have been put on hold because the state plan has the potential to trump whatever is being what the local level might do. Not to show any bias, but if it's not registering, the state bill has the potential to kill single family home zones. Again, there's a use by right issue that will prevent Inglewood from being able to allow the single family homes. So there's at least a couple elements to this, which is whether or not you think this is a good idea. The first question is this a state issue or a city issue? The state's taking away our ability to work through this on our own. And then, ideally this would get reverted back to the city, and then we continue our internal battles on the issue. So that's my little setup without revealing any bias. And then we certainly within the, we don't have to narrowly restrict ourselves, but I think that certainly we should be saying from a water and sewer board perspective, what are our added interests into this issue. And I'll go on about that too if no one raises their hand, but I'll give someone else a chance to jump in.
Find my hand on my phone.
Okay, go ahead, Travis.
I have a couple things. It is interesting that there's no consideration for any of the water issues. How are we supposed to accommodate that? That's like, okay, here's a pork roast, make me green chili. All right. The other thing is, should we have a definition out there in clarity of what use by right means so that everybody understands the gravity of that, especially if you are an individual homeowner?
So the way it's defined in the bill, it's essentially, it's a mandate, it's a requirement. I'm pulling up the language now to provide that with you, to you. But it'll trump any local ordinance.
So you as a, put in my plain English way, you as a owner of this piece of property have a right to it to make it into multifamily housing, and the city cannot take away that right. It comes with the land at that point. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair. That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Does it affect then, as a property owner, it does not give the state the right to come in and decide what's done with it?
That's correct. As a property owner, if say you live in a R1 zone district and you decide you want to sell to a developer, that is your right, and that developer can, depending on where it is located, either make it a multifamily or a triplex without being encumbered by any local zoning restrictions.
But to be clear, on the other side, you can't be forced to turn your property into a multifamily unit, but you just have the right to do it. Okay.
That's correct.
Travis, anything more? And then I'll go to Ty if not.
Well, I don't know. Does
Okay.
Peter have a thought on the consideration of the fact that they're not really putting any definitions on the water element or the sewer, stormwater services, any of that? I mean, that's pretty harsh if we don't know what we're gonna deal with, to just throw that at a city and say, okay, you deal with it.
Yeah, I think without knowing what the final looks like, what we do is we plan for what we have done an analysis of our portfolio and our systems to project what we think the systems as they are currently constructed and as they are today, what we can accommodate from a growth perspective. So there's an anticipation that the city will grow to some degree. That growth is not like, some of the suburban communities that have a lot of greenfield that, will do new housing developments. Our growth, because we're surrounded, is vertical. And so it doesn't mean a lot of irrigation water. It means that instead of 1 or 2 taps on a lot, you end up with, 6 or 8 potentially, or if you go vertical with a large building, it could be dozens. So we looked at that, and this kind of gets into some of the responses for the next staff's choice item, but I think I can answer some of that right now. Is that from a system perspective, right now our system, there's nothing that says that this will dramatically impact our system in a negative way right now. We're not quite sure until we see what we ultimately end with. We can't really analyze, every possible scenario until we know what the issues are. Our system is set up so that it can accommodate a certain amount of growth. When we look at scenario planning for our water rights system and our water supply portfolio, we anticipate that we look at, low yield years and climate change scenarios, and we have multiple scenarios that we look at. And generally we're comfortable that the portfolio can handle a growth from a population perspective that is, without committing to anything, we think we're good to about 50 or 55,000 from a population perspective, from a water perspective. So that aspect doesn't result in an issue unless, you know, the density just goes on and on to the point where we start to exceed that, then we end up with an issue. There's a lot of assumptions that build into that. There's a lot of assumptions in terms of weather patterns over the next several years. And so we try to bake in a certain amount of conservatism to that, but also recognizing that we do need to have the ability to accommodate when growth occurs. So our analysis, you know, right now our good sense is that we're probably good until right around there. So as far as the immediate effect of this bill, I don't know that the water rights side of it is an issue. As far as the infrastructure, sewer infrastructure, water infrastructure, we right now currently, if a developer wants to come in and, you know, take a lot and turn it into a multifamily, we make a model the downstream sewer capacity. We make a model the supply line capacity, and if their proposed development doesn't have supply or downstream capacity, we make them upsize to the required amount in order to accommodate that new density. And so right now we look at that on an individual project by project basis. Ultimately, once we get a more refined, strong interceptor model with our sewer system and our water model, then we can look at that more of a more broader than just individual project based. We can look at it from a set of projects. We're still a couple of years away from that in terms of modeling, but we're better than we were 2 years ago where we were just checking individual projects.
Okay.
So it's a long way of saying the near term, I don't think it necessarily has a negative effect. Longer term, who knows what it could potentially do.
Okay, thank you.
Ty, you're up.
Yeah, I was just gonna respond to Travis's comment. I think echoing a lot of what Peter said, just that with the density that's proposed in kind of the perspective of my previously working at Denver Water, seeing that the less outdoor irrigation from the density of multifamily tends to kind of offset the overall water use of the parcel. So it, like Peter said, there's a lot of uncertainty. It really depends what type of development you're talking about. But from what I've seen, it looks like it would probably be a net even or possibly a little bit better in terms of less outdoor irrigation. But Peter covered all of that and then some.
Thank you.
John, I'm sorry, but I don't have the option of raising my arm. So I apologize. I don't know how you guys can fix that, and then I can wait for my turn.
You are free to go next, Marjan. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say we all traveled all over, United States and other cities, and we kind of seen this kind of a unconscious creation, because when I was researching the affordable housing, and none of it make any sense. And I'd really like to take everybody's attention to the fact that these houses will never get approval to go anything above. So that means that these developers is going to come and they're going to build something that is not sustainable. It's not safe. It's not built properly. And then they sell it and they make their quick money and then move on. And then what we're stuck with these small homes that are full of people that can't afford it. And then they're not going to be able to maintain it. And then it's just going to affect the city. It's going to affect the people, the residents of the city, and then it's just going to be a problem down the road. So we can't kick this can down the road and just expect people to, because if you look at the income and you look at the ratio that they can qualify, and then if you look at the ratio that they have their expenses versus, and consider the inflation on top of that, and people are losing their jobs, it's like they're giving us enough rope to hang ourselves. And we can see that in Denver is already happening. All kinds of problems with people that they can't, brings crime up, traffic, parking, water, sewer, all these problems. And then you can see how the neighborhood goes down the drain. So I'm highly against that. Although, you know, if people want to look at their own selfish, you know, I would say I'm in a space that I really can take advantage of this, but I really don't think it's conscious. I really think that we should allow people have their options, and this doesn't help anybody, besides the developers. And they're going to come in and they bring their their short-term agenda of getting rich fast on someone else's expenses. And I'm highly, highly against this. And we can actually see that how many people are showing resistance against this. And I vote against that at all aspects of it. And thank you for listening to me. I apologize, I couldn't raise my hand. And I apologize for being late. They closed Bellevue, so I couldn't be here on time. So
Oh dear.
thank you.
You're on mute, Chair.
Sorry. Jim, were you just flagging me down or did you want to speak? Oh, now you're on mute. You're on mute too. Still there, Jim. Still on mute.
Okay.
There we
I'm
go.
off mute now, I believe. I'm
in
sorry,
business.
I don't have a hand anywhere on my screen. I've been sitting here looking for it throughout the meeting. This compared to what was being presented with Code Next, it just goes way beyond. And the Colorado Municipal League is certainly up against this and fighting it pretty hard. Now, whether anything will happen with regards to what they are able to do and what cities are able to do, cities and towns, I don't know. But I think as citizens and individuals, anything you can do as far as contacting Jeff Bridges, the senator for Inglewood, or Meg Froelich, our legislator, and let them know your opinions would probably be appreciated. And I do have a question for Victoria. Would you define middle housing again as the state is defining it?
So middle housing, that's in the transit-oriented areas. It's essentially any property or any development that with 3 or more units, 3 or more household units. There's not a cap on it.
Okay. Yeah, I had been thinking that it was more of a smaller, affordable, and addressing more with the finances of it, but it isn't. So anyway, I guess I'm really against this. I've done my due diligence on notifying the state and stuff of my feeling on it, and I think City Council is doing the same.
Actually, Jim, let me just clarify that. My apologies. So middle housing is the up to 6 plexes. So that does have a cap. That would be townhomes up to 6 plexes. Multifamily is the one in the transit corridors that would have separate living units for 3 or more households. And that one doesn't have the cap on the units. So my apologies, I got those two mixed up, but that is what we're looking at.
All right, thank you.
Marjan, and one more.
Miss Victoria, I was researching and from my understanding, and I wanted to make sure that I understand this properly. And I understand that the income that they're showing for Inglewood was like 70,000. And then when I was trying to do the numbers with what they require, that's as far as when they can get qualified for these loans, and then they say how they can sell them. There's so many loops these people have to. Am I looking at the right number? Being 70,000 is the median income.
So I'm not specifically sure what the median income of Englewood is. SB 23-213, the legislation that I'm talking about, while it's being referred to as affordable housing legislation, there are no requirements regarding the affordability of that housing itself. So the legislation is just premised on an economic principle that if there is more supply, this will result in a cheaper housing option. But it does not require a developer to market any housing option at a certain rate or to necessarily meet any income standards.
Thank you for clarifying that for me, because then that makes it even more dangerous. I mean, because I was looking at how are they going to qualify people to go through these obstacles because none of the numbers. So that means that is even more chaotic than, and as I was anticipating to hear that is just like, that means there's just no benefit to anybody but the developers, in my opinion. And thank you for clarifying that. That was very helpful for me. Thank you, Victoria.
Okay, then, all right, thank you. I am, let's do Caitlin, and then I want to move us on, just recognizing the time because there's still a few things to go. But Caitlin, do you have your hand raised?
I was just wondering if if anyone sees the positives, just because I'm hearing a lot of negatives. I'd like to hear if there are any positives to this bill on the city perspective, I guess. Just devil's advocate.
So the main driver is increasing supply of housing. So if you think that's a positive, there you go.
So I'll just say that from my
push.
perspective, our response is a neutral. This is what the system is capable of, and that's really all I'm reporting out is what our analysis of the system is capable of, neutral of whatever occurs with the bill.
I will encourage this is just something, if you individually want to consider reaching out to your state representative, as Jim mentioned, this is something that Jared Paulus is pushing, my understanding is got some pretty strong backing for it. So if it is important to you, this is one of those times to step up and do something, whatever you feel is appropriate. Peter, let me do a time check. I know we have some board members items to address. And we just had, I guess, staff probably response. Was that mainly to my stuff from last time?
Yeah, I have one more little caveat, or one more answer to the questions that came last month. It'll take a minute.
Okay. Go for it.
So on one of the questions last night was what's happening with the Colorado River and how it affects our water supply portfolio. We went back and looked at the vulnerability associated with the Colorado River, and right now, at least in the next 10 years, we don't see the vulnerability as that significant. Our water rights portfolio is predominantly South Platte River water. It's those direct flow rights that are use in Englewood rights. And when you look at our current population, our current water rights, we're in a position where what happens on the Colorado River will have an effect on a small part of our portfolio, but it's in the grand scheme of things, it's pretty minimal in terms of its effect. So I think we're going to pay attention to it, but in terms of an immediate impact, it's not very significant. The other
Peter,
question was, what is the projected?
Peter, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Peter, let me just inject. Do your comments reflect? I know Biden released something today. Do you know if that affects your answer? Has the potential?
So I didn't see what he released. I saw an email referencing that he had released something today. I think our analysis, whatever happens on the Colorado River, our analysis shows that our portfolio is is dominated by South Platte River. Now, the thing to consider is somewhere well down the road, if there's pressure on the south or on the Colorado, that then creates different pressure on the South Platte. I think where Englewood is fortunate in that respect is we have some pretty senior water rights and we're pretty high up in the South Platte Basin. So even then, I think we're positioned pretty well given the seniority of our rights on the South Platte system.
Thank you. If reading it or getting more familiar with the Biden proposal does impact that answer, just let us know. Otherwise,
Okay.
Thank you on that one. Kate?
The second one was what's the projected growth? Really, we don't have we rely on community development on this, and we haven't really gotten a good sense yet from them, but the Arapahoe County projection is about 1% per year. And so with that, and given the numbers that I talked about 10 minutes ago, we're okay to handle growth that at a moderate rate like that for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Appreciate that. I think the fundamental shift in the capacity per lot that's being contemplated can't possibly mean that 1% is still a valid number. Whatever growth was being projected before did not assume a wholesale rezoning of the city. So I'd like to keep that question open. You know, Jim, I don't know if another council member joined us, but I think that's a fair question to consider about what does the total, if this goes through, what is the potential population growth that the land then support, not necessarily the water, but the land then supports. Peter, will you clarify, did the number you threw out earlier, was it 50 to 55,000 or was it
Yeah, 50 to 55,000 population. So
Okay.
right now, I think we're right around 34 as a city. So we can accommodate probably another 20,000-ish, plus or minus.
I was at a town hall recently that the number of 60,000 was thrown out. So that may be helpful. At least if any board members are repeating it, we can go. I think 50 to 55 is probably the number we should be operating from.
We're more
All right,
comfortable with 50 to 55.
Okay. And then doing that, reaching that capacity does mean that, well, let me ask this, what percent of our, so if we could handle 50 to 55 and we're at 34, how much of that excess water are we currently selling today?
I'd have to get in
10 or 15,000.
I would have to get and I'd have to look into that in more detail. And I think I'd actually want to talk to Victoria about that maybe being more of an executive session discussion, because it does get into confidential natures of our water rights portfolio.
Okay, have I said enough that I don't have to say anything more at risk of needing to do the rest in executive session? You understand the gist of my question?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
yeah, we can go and look, and I can just let you know, indicate one way or another. My initial sense is that I can't get you real exact numbers on that, because a lot of this is, you know, planning level and scenario level analysis. But right now, based on the way our portfolio is made up and the subsequent other obligations, that's where we land at that 50 to 55,000 number as growth accommodation that the system can handle.
All right, thank you. Was there any, Ty, go ahead.
If we end up going into executive session, Peter, I'd be interested in hearing if we have a gap in Englewood, what it would look like on the market to find water to make up that gap between, say, the 50 and 55,000 that you're comfortable and the potential of 60,000. I just think that would be some interesting information for the board.
Yeah, we can pull that information together and get some current shares of what water is going for from an acre foot perspective that I think will show that, even to move to 5,000, it's not millions of dollars, it's tens of millions of dollars at a
Wow.
minimum.
Thanks. Why don't we plan to have executive session time in our next meeting? Keep in mind though, this bill in front of at the state level is moving fast. I think, Vicky, I don't remember if you gave us a date, but I think it's just a few weeks away before they're voting on it, or mid-May
Yeah.
or something.
This session ends May 6th, so we expect there to be a vote prior to that.
So, yeah, so that's how fast of a timeline this is for something so dramatic. All right, Peter, were there any more? I forgot if I had other elements that I asked last week. Are there any more?
I guess I could probably go into a little bit more detail if the board wanted to go into exec session in terms of what I see as some of the vulnerabilities. If not, we can just keep moving.
Let me do that. Let me defer asking the board that question. Let's finish the rest of the agenda, and then if we want to spend our final few minutes in executive session, we'll consider it then.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
all right, can we move on? Do we need to talk about the May board meeting at all, or the look ahead?
We're optimistic for May 9th. We'll see how many of those things come through, but we do have a number of things that are hitting. Some of them are just easement dedications for the city ditch alignment down south near Mineral Avenue. We've been working on that with the developer for quite some time. Everything else is just continuing on with the business of the utility.
Okay, very good, thank you. Then I'll move on to board members' choice. Caitlin, I'm going to let you lead if you still, I know you had some questions. If you're still wanting to raise those, we'll start with yours.
Yeah, so I had a question from the health assistant at my daughter's preschool, which is in Inglewood. And she was asking what we as a city are doing about PFAS, because EPA did release that they're going to start considering testing and removal of it. And I vaguely know that it's very challenging to remove it. And I haven't in a while heard any information about progress being made on improving testing tech. I think the testing's there, but the removal of PFAS from water. Haven't heard anything from it. So based on her inquiry, I was wondering if you could go into detail on what we as a city are planning on doing and if we're already sampling it.
Yeah, so I can give a quick update on that. So a couple things on that. The health advisory number that came out probably late in the fall, that was at 4 parts per quadrillion. That's an advisory number that the EPA put forward that essentially says that if you're in a vulnerable population, this could be it could have an adverse health effect. It's not a regulatory number. They just recently came out with their proposed MCL, which is their regulatory level, and that is at 4 parts per trillion for PFAS. When we did our sampling came back at 2.6. So we fall in this space where we're safe from a regulatory perspective, but we're still considered something that's in the health advisory range, where that becomes a individual choice. But EPA is setting a standard that is a drinking water standard that we actually fall below. So that's actually good news from a city perspective. However, we are also continuing to work forward on with the state on sampling. So we are, C.R.S. specifically is working on securing grants that are available, because we were one of the first ones to fully test our PFAS. So that gives us the first crack at these grants. We're going for $426,000 worth of grants to help us with testing and characterization of PFAS levels within the South Platte, and also looking at technologies to remove PFAS that we can incorporate into the Allen treatment plant. So that's the next step from a progression of the technology and the characterization, not just within the plant, but more regionally within the source water supply. And then ultimately, you know, the somewhat, the good news from a regulatory perspective is our results are lower than that proposed MCL that they put forth just a few weeks ago. So kind of a mixed bag to respond to your friend on.
Thank you.
Sorry, Don, go ahead.
I wanted to point out there's a public meeting at City Hall on the 26th of this month about the pipeline project, if anybody's interested. About 3 years ago, I did a thing breaking up.
Hey, Don, I'm wondering if you turned off your camera, you might have a better shot of being heard. You're back to being muted. Okay, and then you're still muted. All right, let's try that and see if it helps. Go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
I think we're in better shape. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, about 3 years ago, I did a presentation for the Historic Society on the early settlers in the Inglewood area, and I included a segment on the irrigation ditches in the area, on some of the early history on those. And so when the piping project was announced, a group in Littleton formed to oppose the piping project, and they contacted Inglewood Historic Society and wanted to know if they wanted to join them. So they asked me to join in the opposition. And I told them, well, I'll help you, but not as opposition. We need to replan this because we need the pipeline project. So they finally switched their focus, and hopefully they'll have some of what they need in this project that's going to be presented on the 26th.
I can provide a little update on that if you'd like.
Please go ahead.
So we have two public meetings. One is on the 26th, and that is in Englewood. Then we have one in Littleton. I believe that's May 3rd. Is that, Sarah, do you know the date on that? It's in the first week of May. Essentially right now we're working through the alignment study, and we're working to define the best, most cost-effective alignment for the city ratepayers from a water perspective. And then from there, we will work with the public, and we're continuing to work with the stakeholders, which include both historical preservation societies, to look to ways to create a win-win project that allows for the maintaining of the corridor for City Ditch. There has been a push, at least on the Littleton side, to create some kind of a water feature that continues to run water through the ditch longer term. We, from a water supply perspective, have an issue with that because it goes against basically all conservation efforts that the state has been working towards for the last several decades. It essentially becomes just a water feature that flows water. And so while we want to work with the historic preservation societies to preserve the corridor, which we think we'll find some successful solution there, as it relates to flowing water in the Littleton sections, anything upstream of the Allen plant, we do not support that because it is contrary to our water supply goals. North of the Allen plant, so through the city of Englewood and into Cherry Hills a little bit, we are not touching the ditch from a piping perspective. So there's open channel sections, there's pipe sections. So there will be remaining into the future from Allen Plant to Harbor Gulch, sections of the ditch that run through Littleton through Englewood that will not be affected. The project is from Chatfield to the Allen Plant.
What time is the meeting? I'm sorry.
I'd have to pull it up on my calendar. Sarah might have that answer. but
Yeah,
sure.
so I can answer that question. So it's an open house format. So it starts at 4 p.m. and goes till 7 in Inglewood. And then the week after on May 3rd, it's from 4 to 6:30 in Littleton, also open house format.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Are there any more issues from the board tonight?
May I mention something? I understand that you guys might be familiar with this, but the city of Greenwood Village and Cherry Hills is fighting this bill strongly. I just wanted to, I am very aware of that they are against it and they're just putting their efforts toward that. So, and I heard Littleton, but Peter probably knows that better. But I just wanted to give you a heads up about that too, that there are other people against this. Other cities.
And then let me, as I wrap up on this, we formally added this board member's choice. It was always implied, but we added it. But if to the extent you guys know there's a question you want to raise at a board meeting, if you give me or staff a preview of the question, as Caitlin did this week, we have a chance of being able, staff can actually increases the chance they can answer it on the fly. So I think that worked out really nicely. It is 11 minutes past our normal time. I'm going to leave it up to the board whether or not you guys want to spend a few minutes in executive session. And I'm going to do that by saying, would anyone like to make a motion to go into executive session for a conference with the city attorney for purposes of receiving legal advice on a specific legal questions regarding S Bill 23-21-3? Not hearing a motion yet, which will leave it where it is for tonight. Pardon?
I
motion it.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have it. Before I take a vote, Victoria, did I set that up sufficiently that if we choose to go in, I've handled that all right?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor of going into executive session, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? I'm not
Nay.
hearing any. Okay, there's at least one opposed. Not enough to override. All right, I think we are going into executive session. We'll try to keep it short. Do we need to do any technology changes before we?
Yeah,
Get
I'm
it-
setting
get in
up the
there.
breakout room right now.
All right, thank you.
I'm assuming the whole board wants to go in there and our staff, Victor and Brian, do you want to go into executive session as well?
Doesn't sound like based on the topic that I'll be needed. I'm happy to attend if requested though.
Yeah, I don't think Victor's needs to go. Brian, from a planning perspective, I'm assuming the discussion is going to be more about water rights than it is going to be about I don't know.
Okay.
I don't necessarily need to be present for executive session.
Okay. I would
Okay.
recommend from a staff perspective that it's myself, Brenda, Vicky, and Sarah.
All right, hopefully we see you on the other side. All right, I'm joining. Okay. Oh, good. I think we started to say we might have lost a few people along the way, but they're showing up. Okay. That's great. Just so I can say thank you, everyone. We are adjourned. Appreciate your extra time tonight. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay.
Goodbye.